Alright guys, HyDra again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far as Kenny intends to revitalise the culture of OpTic Texas going forwards. He may have a rather more challenging time on his hands than he expected, with Hex and Kenny revealing that Dashy was 2.5 hours late roughly to the announcement video that OpTic did. There were some extenuating circumstances and Kenny does believe that Dashy is still a new man, but it's something to watch for sure for these guys going into the new season. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. First of all, thought this is another kind of interesting thing between Attach and Priestahh. He was looking back on a classic match they played at Gfinity, went all the way to Game 7, and as Clay says something like for the boys, we were kind of a gross duo, so I don't know if there's actually anything going on here with Clay and Attach, but given the fact that there haven't really been too many rumours as to where these two might go, it's plausible they end up on the same team. I know you guys were giving your thoughts in the comments below on like which SMGs they could put with this duo if they were to go to a Los Angeles Guerrillas or something. This also, because last night we discussed that Zuma had heard that aBeZy is on the new team. Now, I don't know if I trust Zuma's sources or whatever because we've seen some questionable things lately and some people seem to disagree. For example, Jacob Hell comes in and replies and says, no, that's basically not happening. Because, look, he gave the initial rumour that it was Ghosty, Cammy, Afro, JoeDeceives, and he hasn't given an update, right? He still seems confident, it seems, that that is the roster of 4. So, look, I don't know where Zuma got this from or if this is true. I think that what Zuma's saying actually might be the way this team should go, but Jacob L doesn't seem to agree. So that's going to be very interesting because even Nadeshot, I think there was an episode that came out last night on the 100 Thieves channel where Nadeshot was heavily implying the team is done. Like it's locked in. The 4 guys we've got are going to be, you know, potentially high upside if things go well. Theoretically not the greatest talents in the league, but, you know, they're all being hogged by the top 4 teams in the game right now, theoretically going into next year. So, yeah, maybe it is going to be this team of 4 after all, despite all the rumours to the contrary over the last couple of days. So that is going to be an interesting litmus test of whether Zuma's source is actually a complete fraud. So I'm quite looking forward to the resolution of this one. Now, we will probably get to see this type of stuff on the CDL player tracker. So this player tracker, if you guys aren't aware of it, we can even look back at previous seasons such as 2023. This is, you know, September 2022, the signings that were made at that time. It tells you the dates and all this stuff. And even the 2024 season, where you can look at June 2023 and see the option was exercised on Cellium, Simp, aBeZy on June the 30th, and the same for some of these other players. And Skyz was like re-signed a new deal at that point, something like that anyway. Now, if we go to July, on July the 21st, we see this. So we've got Slasher, Priestahh signed, Envoy signs, and also Classic signs. Kind of interesting because this has not been confirmed yet, and when I happened to check this yesterday, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. That's probably worth a tweet that Classic is signed to FaZe, and we don't know that. It's not been confirmed. He's been their substitute, right, for the last season, but and you'd probably expect him to be coming back again because they don't want him to go to another team and beat them like he used to do back on Seattle Surge in the Cold War days, Major 5, you guys I'm sure remember if you were watching back then. So yeah, like they're keeping Nicky D around, but it's not been confirmed by them, but it's been confirmed by the CDL. So the funny thing about this is not everything is on here at all. If we scroll all the way down here, and we'll get to this July the 14th thing in a second, we can see Drazah, we can see Snoopy, and even on July the 7th, we see Pred was signed to OpTic, apparently way back on July the 7th. But obviously, Kenny is signed, like he's doing the content, he's on the team, that deal is done, but yet it's not on this page. So this page has always been historically highly inconsistent. Sometimes they'll be on here, sometimes they won't, sometimes it'll take ages for them to appear, or sometimes they appear too early. Now, I don't know how early Pred was on here, whether they just added this after they confirmed him, which I'm hoping that they did, and I'm assuming they did, because otherwise, surely someone would have spotted this, and Hex wouldn't have been happy about it before the time. And then once OpTic announced it, then theoretically they can then, you know, retroactively go back and say, yeah, it was July the 7th was when he was officially confirmed to us. But yesterday, under this July the 14th header, was Sib. And this was, you know, when I checked this, I was like, no way is this actually what's happening, because either they just don't update this page at all in time, or apparently they update it too early, because here we go with, as of course, Drazah. Now, this was removed later in the evening, but, you know, because obviously they realised their mistake, or they just needed to change Sib's surname, because, you know, Dante Gray it's a funny name to be fair, but Gray, like, I'm pretty sure his surname is spelt with an A, not an E. So they bottled that as well. They got that wrong. So I don't know if I don't think they removed it because they spelt his surname wrong. I imagine they removed it because they realized that actually Subliners haven't announced Sib yet. So this isn't really so much of a leak more than it is a confirmation. We know that Sib's going to Subliners. It's been rumored for some time, but if there was any doubt in your mind, the CDL have literally confirmed on their own website that he was signed apparently on the 14th of July, and that's now been removed. So I just thought this is pretty funny, to be honest. And I struggle to understand how most of the time the player tracker was just out of date or just not updated at all, and then they managed to update this even way before Subliners even announced their team. So unfortunate for New York, but if there was any lingering doubts that that's what Subliners are doing, then it was officially confirmed by the CDL pretty much yesterday. Now, there's been a lot of talk from OpTic fans, and for good reason, around the vibes on this squad, right? The vibes are impeccable, like the team's going to be great in all this. And let's be honest, we've heard this before, right? Going into the Vanguard season, the vibes on that roster with Scump and Shotzzy and Dashy and Illy were also similarly impeccable. And look, the team did great at the start of the season, and injury derailed the team. Things started to fall off. But nonetheless, the culture, the team chemistry, this type of stuff is going to be a massively important factor. Kenny has been making it very clear in all the pieces of content that he's done that that's what he wants to be. He wants to kind of like be what Astralis used to be, where they would rock up together, they would spend a lot of time together, and there'd be boys in and out of the game, and that is what he believes is, well, to the best success of the roster. But there will be some hiccups to deal with. When you're a roster, there's always things to, you know, work out, and one of the questions has been, how's the Kenny Dashy thing going to work? They've no doubt matured a lot since the OGLA days, and Kenny admits that here in the eavesdrop episode that he does with Hex that was revealed or was released yesterday, discussing a load of different things. But the interesting part is, and I know people are going to say, oh, Rab, like, you keep pushing this narrative, but it's like, I'm not making these things up. Like, I'm not the one who mentions Dashy being late for the announcement. Hex and Kenny talk about it here, and they do talk about the extenuating circumstances, that Dashy had a bad travel day the day before, and I guess like he slept in or whatever the case was and wasn't up in time. But you know, and Hex was like, look, I'm not accepting any excuses. I almost called his mum to say like, nah, this guy hasn't changed and all this, and he got pretty angry about it apparently. But still, so Kenny says, look, it's not a big deal. A little bit frustrating because Kenny doesn't like his time to get wasted, but he's more like, look, I think Dashy's changed, and when we get to the season, that's when I'm really going to start caring.
I mean, me and Brandon didn't have the best working.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that
we
up.
didn't have the best like year together, but like I feel like for us, both of us, we've matured since then, and we had no bad blood towards each other. We've always just been friends.
Yeah.
So it's not like that big of a thing. It's just like, okay, now we understand, like, he's worked with me before, so he knows how I work or how I deal, and I take practice so seriously that like I've already told everybody like what I expect out of them as well. So
I mean, 2 days ago aside, he hasn't been late for anything, Brandon. And then we're about to do the announcement. How late was he? 2.5 hours?
Yeah.
2.5 hours. And I'm like, yo, you teamed with this dude when you were that, and now that he's back, you're gonna welcome him here by saying he's like, yeah, you thought I matured, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, no, he's been really, really good, and I don't. He just flew in from Canada, and you know me, something you'll get to know is about me. Excuses aren't like, I just don't accept them. Matt knows more than anyone. I'm like, Matt, I'd rather you say I f***ed up than give me a reason or an excuse, because then I'm more likely to be understanding to that, and something in my brain just goes to the complete opposite when somebody does that. So when I texted Brandon, I'm like, yo, you ain't 12, motherfucker. Like, get your ass to work. You know,
I feel that. I mean, like, I was telling I had to call my girlfriend yesterday, and not yesterday, but a few days ago when Brandon was late. And I obviously wasn't tripping about it. I just was like, I'm new to the team. I'm here. Like, I took note of it. I'm just like, but I know he had like a bad travel day. So I kind of was just like, okay, whatever. I'm going to be big on those things when the season starts, because for me, I don't play those things either. I don't like late. I don't like half-ass practice. Like, stuff like that is just not built in my bone. Yeah, it's just not built in me. Like, I hate wasted time. Wasted time's like one of my biggest like pet. Like, I don't like my time being wasted. So we're professionals, and like once the season starts, I'll just address things then, because I'm not looking back at those things like, oh, Brandon did this back in the day. Like, I think he's gonna still do it. And in the back of my mind, I have those things, but I'm not like going into it with that mentality, because I don't want to I'd rather us both just show up and like be the best we can be, and then like if something falls off, I can address it that way in like a new fashion. Not like, yo, back in the day you used to do this, now you still do this, like type thing. It's like I see Brand as a new person.
Yeah. Well, he better be. The thing is that he has, and even I, right? Like when he was late, immediately the same feelings from before came to me, and I just acted on those feelings. And I talk shit. I was almost on the phone with his mom, supposed to be like, yo. But nah, he's one of my favorite people just in general.
So I know there's people that are going to be like, oh, you're pushing this narrative again and all this. But, like Hex talked about it straight up and said that Dashy was 2.5 hours late for this thing. So, we've got to at least talk about it. And yes, Hex did say that like he hopes that Dashy's a new man, and Kenny says that he is, and they've matured and all this over the years. And I think there's definitely a large element of truth to that. And in fairness, the off-season is a bit different anyway, right? You were late to the announcement. It is a bit funny, as Hex said, that back in the day, Kenny had problems with Dashy that he was always late. And then literally the day they go to announce Kenny and do the kind of announcement, record it all right at the OpTic HQ, NVHQ, downtown Dallas, whatever, then, Dashy turns up late again. So it's not exactly the best look. But at the same time, it's the off-season. These guys are like, Dashy's probably been grinding Valorant until the early hours of the morning. So I can understand it. And probably had a pretty bad travel day. So you can understand it. And I don't think that... it does seem to me that Dashy's definitely grown and matured as a player. Kenny seems to think that as well, but it will be an interesting one to just keep up on because Kenny is very big on this stuff, and I think will be an incredibly positive force for this team, absolutely. And it's whether Dashy can fully buy into that, which I think that they can because they get on well. So I imagine this is going to be the case. But it is funny how... often a story like this will seem to emerge. I mean, it was earlier this season, right, where we had some talk about, basically Dashy was saying when the whole Rambo drama went down that he was late for scrims one time and Rambo just like absolutely laid into him. Whereas when other people turned up a little bit late, he didn't really care so much. And it's a difficult one, right? Because given Dashy's, his reputation precedes him to some extent, and even Hex talked about it, right? He was like, well, Dashy was there 2.5 hours late to this thing we were trying to do, and that wasn't great, and he was really annoyed, and he started going off at Dashy because of, what he's done in the past, and obviously not giving him the benefit of the doubt based on being late previously. And it seems like every year there's some story like this that Dashy turned up late for something, and look, if it's a one-off, it's not a big deal. Players turn up late for scrims all the time, but because it's Dashy and he's got that bit of a reputation, then people talk about it a little bit more, as did Hex and Kenny on the podcast, right? So it seems to me they're trying to put a little bit of pressure on Dashy here to actually make sure that he delivers on this intention to be the reformed and changed man and player that he seems to be developing towards. And look, he's not perfect, nobody's perfect, and look, I think that he can still be a really positive force in this team. His ability is, of course, absolutely without question, and frankly, Dashy's not going to be the scapegoat for OpTic. I don't think that's ever going to be the case. If they lose, people are going to blame Kenny for YYing too much, or they're going to blame Karma for some reason as their coach. Karma's used to being the scapegoat of OpTic, so I'm sure that he's, if he does come back as the full-time coach, which it seems like he probably will, then he's probably going to get used to it, or OpTic will just win everything, there'll be no scapegoats. But, it is very strange, I would say as well, the consistency of this OpTic complacency narrative, right? Because we saw Dashy say a couple of days ago that I think he was talking about Ghosty, but whoever you think he was talking about, saying that the team got complacent, the team was making all these excuses, and they basically got back-to-back seconds, and then they took their foot off the gas a little bit. It's like, this is such a consistent trend with OpTic, and you can't just blame Ghosty for it, as far as I'm concerned. It's an entire team thing, or, obviously Dashy's been there a lot of the time as well, but during the OpTic Chicago days, you guys will remember this. OpTic Chicago, Cold War season, they beat FaZe in an online league match at the start of the Stage 5 qualifiers, and they thought that they were it. They'd done it. They'd beaten FaZe. They were now, number one, and they got complacent after they won an online series against FaZe. They turn up to champs, they get bodied, FaZe win the World Championship, right? This is not a new thing that OpTic are getting complacent mid-season, and it's a trend they've got to stop. And I think that Kenny will do his best to try and make that happen, but there might be multiple reasons why that seems to be a bit more of a consistent trend than many OpTic fans would like to see. So I guess we'll see. So what's your guys' perspective on this? Just a one-off instance in the off-season doesn't matter too much, or is this potentially a sign of that Kenny's going to have to really be on it this season in order to make sure that some of the issues that OpTic have had over the last few years don't recur to such a great extent? And also just to confirm, Gfinity Summer Masters, FaZe took them down, and also I thought it was quite nice just to see see the grand final stats for this series. I know that EasyMac has been talking about putting together some like OG grand final stats, and actually Enable, right, top performer of the series, at least from KD, 1.18 in the grand finals here. We did an awesome video on the Breaking Point channel last night. You guys might have seen it already on the story of Enable, so I'll push you guys over there if you haven't watched that yet, because Enable's story is crazy, and as far as I'm concerned, he's a highly underrated figure in esports, overshadowed to some extent by Formal, but yeah, given his story, the nub on his right thumb and all this, an absolutely awesome player in story, no doubt about it. But very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.